Sarah Bennett spent her last $40 on a stranger's breakfast. The next morning changed everything. Let me take you back to Tuesday morning, November 14th, at Rosie's Diner in Cedar Falls, Montana. Sarah Bennett, 34 years old, single mother of two, was working her fifth double shift that week. Her daughter Emma needed braces, $3, $200. Her son Tyler's asthma medication cost $180 a month, and her beat-up Honda Civic. The check engine light had been on for 6 weeks. She checked her bank account on her phone during a brief pause. The balance read $347.18. But what happened during the morning rush on that ordinary Tuesday would prove that some debts can never truly be repaid. At 7:43 a.m., an elderly man walked in. Robert Cunningham, 78, wearing a worn brown jacket that had seen better days. He sat in booth 7, Sarah's section. Now Sarah had been a waitress for 12 years. She could read people. And something about this man's eyes told her a story, one she'd seen in her own mirror too many times. She noticed his wedding ring, a worn photo, tucked in his wallet as he opened the menu. He ordered the senior special. Coffee black, 2 eggs, scrambled, wheat toast, $8.47 with tax. But when Robert reached for his wallet to pay, his face went pale. He frantically searched his pockets. The wallet was empty. I thought I had. I'm so sorry, miss, he said quietly, shame washing over his weathered face. Now here's what Sarah didn't know. Robert Cunningham wasn't just any stranger, and that breakfast, it would cost Sarah everything before it gave her everything back. Sarah looked at Robert, then at her order pad, then at her own wallet in her apron. Her bank account showed $347.18. Rent due was $950. Groceries needed at least $200. Tyler's medicine, $180. The math didn't work, it never did. But Sarah Bennett wasn't raised to let an old man go hungry. She reached for her own money. Sir, don't worry about it. Breakfast is on me today. Robert's eyes welled up. I can't let you. My father always said kindness isn't kindness if it's easy. Please, eat. She handed over $40, her tip money from the entire morning shift. Every single dollar she'd earned since clocking in at 5 a.m. But here's where this story takes a turn. Because as Robert stood to leave, he did something strange. He paused at the door and turned back. What's your name, miss? Sarah Bennett. Robert nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory, burning those 2 words into his mind. Thank you, Sarah Bennett. You've given an old man more than breakfast today. And then he walked out into the cold November morning, the bell above the diner door chiming softly behind him. Sarah watched him disappear down the street, not knowing that in exactly 18 hours, her entire world would shatter. Not knowing that those $40 would lead to a phone call she'd replay in her mind for the rest of her life. Not knowing that Robert Cunningham's trembling hands weren't just from old age. She returned to wiping down tables, her apron lighter, her tips gone, unaware that she'd just made the most important investment of her life. That $40, Sarah needed it for gas to get to her second job at the grocery store. So that night she walked 3 miles in the November cold. Her breath came out in visible clouds. Her feet ached. The temperature had dropped to 28 degrees, and her jacket wasn't thick enough, but she kept moving one step after another because that's what you do when you're a mother and quitting isn't an option. When she got home at 11:47 p.m., her daughter Emma was still awake, doing homework by the light of her phone because they'd switched to lower wattage bulbs to save on electricity. Mom, did you eat dinner? Had a big lunch, sweetie. I'm fine. She hadn't. Sarah's last meal had been at 6 a.m., a stale muffin from the day-old rack at the diner. But what Sarah didn't know, while she was walking those 3 miles, her life was already changing, because Robert Cunningham had made a phone call. From an office across town, a conversation was happening that would alter everything. You're absolutely certain? A voice asked, measured, professional, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who made decisions that moved millions. Completely, Robert replied. She's the one, James. After 43 years, I finally found her. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and she had no idea. None. She just saw an old man who needed help. She gave up her last $40 without hesitation, without asking questions, without expecting anything in return. Then it's time, the voice said. Prepare the documents. We move tomorrow morning. Robert hung up the phone and looked at the business card in his hand, the one he'd palmed from the diner's counter. Rosie's Diner, Sarah Bennett, server. He'd been searching for someone like her for over 4 decades. And tomorrow, Sarah Bennett's ordinary life would end forever. Wednesday morning. Sarah's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. Same routine, same diner, different destiny. She arrived at Rosie's in the pre-dawn darkness, unlocked the door, started the coffee makers, set up the condiment stations. The same choreography she'd performed 1,000 times before. At 9:17 a.m., a man in a charcoal gray suit walked through the door. Leather briefcase, Italian shoes, a Rolex that caught the morning light. This wasn't a Rossi's diner customer. The conversations around the diner dimmed. People looked up from their pancakes and newspapers. "I'm looking for Sarah Bennett." Sarah approached, wiping her hands on her apron, confusion flickering across her face. "That's me. Can I help you?" "Ms. Bennett, my name is James Harrison. I'm an attorney with Harrison and Stone. I represent the estate of Robert Cunningham." Sarah's expression shifted. Estate. The word hung in the air like a weight. "Estate? I just saw Mr. Cunningham yesterday. Is he? He passed away last night, peacefully in his sleep. He was 78 years old." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. The coffee pot she'd been holding nearly slipped from her other hand. She'd only known this man for 20 minutes, but the news hit her like a punch to the chest. She'd fed him his last meal. She'd seen kindness in his eyes, and now he was gone. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He seemed like such a gentle soul." "He was," James said, "which is why I'm here." The lawyer reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope, official looking, the kind that contains documents that change lives. "Ms. Bennett, before Robert Cunningham passed, he made some very specific arrangements, and you are named as the primary beneficiary." The diner had gone completely silent now. Even the cook had stopped flipping eggs. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Beneficiary? I only met him once. I bought him breakfast." James Harrison looked at her with an expression that was equal parts professional composure and barely contained emotion. "Ms. Bennett, that breakfast cost you $40. What I'm about to tell you will explain why Robert Cunningham spent 43 years searching for someone exactly like you. Ms. Bennett, yesterday morning you performed an act of kindness for Mr. Cunningham. You paid for his breakfast when he couldn't." Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. "It was just $8 and some change. That $8 meant everything to him, and because of it, he changed his will. Last night at 6:47 p.m., 3 hours before his passing." James opened his briefcase and pulled out documents, thick, official, embossed with legal seals, and beside them a brass key. "Sarah Bennett, you are now the sole beneficiary of the Cunningham estate." Silence, complete silence. Sarah just stared, her mind unable to process the words. I don't understand. I don't even know who he was." But here's what she was about to learn. Robert Cunningham wasn't a poor old man. He was testing humanity one last time. Robert Cunningham, born 1948, Cedar Falls, Montana, started with nothing. The son of a coal miner, grew up in a 2-room house with no running water. But he had a mind for business and hands that never stopped working. He built Cunningham Industries from the ground up. Manufacturing, real estate, investments. By 1982, he was a millionaire. By 1995, he'd multiplied that fortune several times over, worth $8.7 million at the time of his death. He had the kind of success story that made local newspapers. The American dream, they called it, but 43 years ago, Robert lost everything that mattered. His wife, Margaret, died in childbirth on a December evening. Complications the doctors said they couldn't have predicted. The baby, a girl they were going to name Grace, didn't survive either. And Robert Cunningham, for all his wealth, couldn't buy back what mattered most. He became hollow inside. The money meant nothing. The business meant nothing. He went through the motions of living, but he was just existing. So he started searching for proof that kindness still existed in the world, that humanity hadn't been completely consumed by greed and indifference. He would go to diners, restaurants, gas stations. He'd pretend he couldn't pay and see what people would do. In 43 years, he'd tried this experiment 217 times. 217 times he was turned away. Ignored, told to leave, sometimes with anger, sometimes with contempt. Once the police were called, until Tuesday morning, until Sarah Bennett. James Harrison looked at Sarah with an expression of deep respect. "In 43 years, Ms. Bennett, you were the first person to help him without hesitation, without judgment. You gave from your own need, not your excess." And that night, Robert called me from his hospital bed. He checked himself in, knowing his time was short, and he changed everything. James Harrison placed that brass key on the table between them. It was old, worn smooth by years of use, attached to a simple leather fob with an address engraved on a small metal plate. "This key opens Mr. Cunningham's house at 1847 Maple Ridge Road. It's yours now, the house, the property, all of it." Sarah's hands started shaking. She pulled them into her lap, trying to steady herself. "This can't be real. Why would he?" "Because you saw him. Not his clothes, not his empty wallet, not a transaction or an inconvenience. You saw a human being who needed help, and you helped." The other diners were watching now, not even pretending to look away. Some had their phones out, but they weren't filming. They were just frozen, witnessing something none of them had ever seen before. James reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a handwritten letter. The paper was cream-colored, expensive, the handwriting shaky but deliberate. "He left this for you." Sarah took the letter with trembling fingers. She opened it, and her eyes filled with tears before she'd read 3 words. But she read it aloud, her voice breaking. Dear Sarah, yesterday I walked into Rosie's diner ready to give up on people forever. I had given humanity one final test, and for 43 years humanity failed. 217 times I sat in restaurants pretending poverty, watching people choose comfort over compassion. But you reminded me what Margaret always said. Kindness is the rent we pay for living on earth. You paid my rent when I couldn't. Now let me pay yours. You have children who need their mother not to be so tired. You have dreams you've deferred because you're too busy surviving. Let them have their mother back. Let yourself dream again. You earned this not with what you gave me, but with who you are. This isn't charity. This is the universe balancing its books. With gratitude and hope restored, Robert. Sarah's composure shattered completely. She doubled over, sobbing, not sad tears, but the kind of crying that comes when a dam finally breaks after years of holding everything back. The exhaustion, the fear, the endless math that never added up, the sacrifices that never seemed to matter. James Harrison stood respectfully silent, giving her the dignity of her emotion. The cook came out from the kitchen. Other waitresses gathered around. Even customers stood up from their booths. And in that small-town diner, everyone understood they were witnessing grace made manifest. In that moment, Sarah Bennett understood something profound. She hadn't just bought a stranger breakfast. She'd restored a dying man's faith in humanity. And in doing so, she'd saved herself. But the story doesn't end there. 1 week later, Sarah stood in front of 1847 Maple Ridge Road for the first time. The house took her breath away. A beautiful Victorian painted cream and sage green with a wraparound porch and original stained glass windows. The kind of house she'd only ever seen in magazines. Well-maintained gardens, mature oak trees, a detached garage, 4 bedrooms. 2 acres of land, fully paid off, valued at $680,000. Inside, she found something that broke her heart all over again. Children's rooms that were never used, a nursery frozen in time from 1982, still decorated in soft yellow and white, a wooden crib that never held the baby it was built for. Margaret Cunningham's hope, preserved like a museum to loss. Robert had kept it exactly as it was. For 43 years, he'd walked past that room every single day. But the house was just the beginning, because James Harrison had one more envelope. They sat in Robert's study, now Sarah's study, surrounded by built-in bookshelves and the smell of old leather. There's also a trust fund, $2.3 million, managed through a carefully structured investment portfolio. Mr. Cunningham's instructions were very specific about how it should be managed to ensure it lasts for generations. Your children's education is fully funded. There's a monthly distribution to cover living expenses. The principal is protected. Sarah couldn't speak. Numbers that large didn't feel real. They felt like a foreign language. Sarah Bennett, who 3 weeks earlier was calculating whether she could afford both gas and groceries, deciding which bill could wait another month, walking 3 miles in the freezing cold to save $40, was now a millionaire. Emma would get her braces. Tyler would have his medicine. The check engine light could finally be fixed. More than that, Emma and Tyler could go to college, any college they wanted, but not everyone was happy about this. Because Robert Cunningham had a nephew, Marcus Cunningham, and Marcus had been expecting that inheritance for decades. He sat in his own lawyer's office across town, his face red with fury, his expensive suit barely containing his rage. Some random waitress gets everything? My uncle was clearly mentally incompetent. He changed his will the day before he died. Obviously, he wasn't in his right mind. We're contesting this. I want every dollar. That's family money, and it belongs to family. His lawyer nodded, already drafting the paperwork. The legal challenge was filed on Friday afternoon. Sarah would receive the notice on Monday morning. For 8 weeks, Marcus Cunningham dragged Sarah through legal hell. Depositions where lawyers asked invasive questions about her finances, her relationships, her character. Court hearings that took her away from her children. Character assassination in local newspapers. Anonymous quotes calling her a con artist, a manipulator. He claimed Sarah had manipulated a vulnerable old man in his final hours. He brought witnesses, a cousin who claimed Sarah had been seen talking to Robert before that Tuesday, planning the whole thing. A former business associate who said Robert had been showing signs of dementia for months. Lies, but lies that had to be refuted, documented, disproven. Sarah couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The stress was crushing her. Then came the final hearing, March 14th. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Marcus's lawyer was mid-argument, pontificating about undue influence and cognitive decline when James Harrison stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to present Robert Cunningham's video testimony recorded the day he changed his will. The courtroom went silent. Marcus's face went pale. The screen flickered to life. Robert Cunningham sat in his hospital bed, looking directly at the camera with eyes that were sharp, clear, completely lucid. I, Robert Joseph Cunningham, being of completely sound mind, and I challenge anyone to prove otherwise, am making this change for a simple reason. My nephew Marcus has visited me 3 times in the past decade. Each time, within 20 minutes, he asked about my will. Sarah Bennett visited me once, bought me breakfast with money she desperately needed, and asked for nothing. She didn't know who I was, she didn't want anything from me, she just saw someone who needed help. Character isn't what we do when people are watching, it's what we do when no one is. Sarah passed a test Marcus never even knew he was taking, and failed. Marcus's lawyer had no response. The judge took less than 10 minutes to deliberate. The case was dismissed. The will stood. Sarah Bennett's act of kindness was protected by the law. Today, Sarah Bennett still works at Rosie's Diner, 2 mornings a week because she loves it. Her children, Emma and Tyler, attend the best schools in Cedar Falls. Emma got her braces. She smiles without covering her mouth now. Tyler's medicine is never a worry. The Honda Civic has been replaced, but Sarah kept it anyway, fully repaired as a reminder. But here's the part that would make Robert Cunningham smile. Sarah started something called the Cunningham Foundation. Every month, she goes to diners, restaurants, grocery stores across Cedar Falls. And when she sees someone counting pennies, someone who can't quite afford their meal, someone struggling with that impossible math she knew so well, she pays. Anonymously. In the 3 years since that November morning, the Cunningham Foundation has helped 1,847 people. Sarah Bennett spent her last $40 on a stranger's breakfast. And that stranger gave her back her life. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness unlocks everything.